on the Israeli side and occupied the oil fields and turned them all over to Israel. It was called Operation Cyanide. And it was a joint operation between America and Israel. And the whole purpose of it was to sink the Liberty, blame it on Egypt, and then invade with American forces, which, again, total catastrophe when the ship didn't sink. This had been the result of 20 years of planning between Washington and Tel Aviv. It would have been the 20th anniversary of the State of Israel the next year, 1968. And this was the beginning of Eretz Israel, Greater Israel, where Israel spreads out throughout the Middle East. Well, how long has that been? That's 67, 33 plus 1. 34 years later, in 2001, it took that long to come up with a new surefire version of Operation Cyanide, which was the attack at 9/11, 34 years later. But this shows what a disaster, what a catastrophe it was for Israel and the Jews and the U.S. government. Anyway, turns out that the Soviet destroyer, once the attack happened and they saw what was happening, they realized they were going to be blamed, because the purpose of going against Egypt was to get the Soviet Union out of the Middle East, because Egypt was a client of the Soviet Union, just as Israel is a client of America. So these guys, these Soviet naval guys, protected the ship. It took 18 hours, 17 or 18 hours, for Liberty to make contact with the fleet, which was up on maneuvers and machines. It's the most diabolical thing that's ever been done.
And one of the people that was involved with the assassination of John F. Kennedy was leading that. That would be our illustrious LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson. He covered for the Israelis, and his lawyer told me that he was involved with the assassination of Kennedy. And of course, the first thing that Johnson did, flying back to Washington from Dallas, was to recall Executive Order 11110, at least to recall all of the money that Kennedy issued. And I carry one of his $5 bills that says United States note. I carry that in my wallet.
Yeah.
Is that somebody in your background there? Or am I getting interfered with on the radio?
I think it's on your end. I don't have any noise here.
Okay. I don't know where that could be coming from, but possibly Veterans Truth. All right, it's not interfering with anything, so we're doing all right. So the whole Cold War was bullshit. This was all set up and organized by the Jews to sell more nuclear missiles, nuclear weapons to both sides. They armed both sides.
Yeah, the Soviet Union, was our great noble ally, quote unquote, for 3.5 years during World War II, in which we colonized Eastern Europe and China, North Korea, and so forth. Then magically, within a couple of years, 3 years, it became our deadly enemy. This is like straight out of George Orwell, with constantly changing enemies and allies. It keep the people totally baffled. Can't figure out who's on first, what's going on. And it's always very lucrative for these so-called defense contractors. That's where they get their bread and butter, is through war and the threat of war. So yeah, that's all that is. That Cold War thing is mind control, religion, war, all this stuff is all mind control, keeping the people off balance so we can't figure out what to do. But what we got to do is overthrow this stinking government. You can't reform it. You can't move our way out of this mess. The politicians not only aren't going to save us. They can't save us. They're the problem. The whole thing is contrived to keep us under control. And mind control and physical control. And now Jade Helm seems to be the physical control part of it. But at some point, you know, if they get the nerve, if the Jews in charge of our government finally get the nerve to crack down, it's got to happen sometime. Otherwise, everything they planned is not going to work. They've got to get rid of their enemies. They got to round people up, and so we just have to get it down our thick heads. The minute this starts, we got to start shooting people. Now, it's been said that there are 1,500 people involved in Jade Helm. I mean, Jim Fetzer has pointed out that there's 1,500 armored personnel carriers and trucks and Humvees and so forth involved. Well, that means there's a hell of a lot of people. Now, the only threat that represents to me is roadblocks. Now, 1,500 vehicles doesn't sound like very much against. I mean, we got, in Pennsylvania alone, we got 1.4 million licensed deer hunters. The NRA says there's 21 million licensed hunters in America. That's people who actually are able to kill something with their rifles and shotguns. Well, that's a big threat to the system. Now, the only way Jade Helm or something like it would be a threat to us is if these vehicles are used at choke points, at roadblocks, and that is totally unacceptable. These roadblocks would have to be taken out at all costs. We cannot allow this to be set up in America. But that's what I think they're going to be doing. You wouldn't need that many vehicles. Second.
That brings me to the other point, and you did that very nicely. They just opened up and killed 9 and wounded 18 bikers in Waco. I call it Waco 2. Now, I've been a biker my whole life. One of the clubs that was involved with that, the Banditos, my original club in Texas over 40 years ago was the Ghost Riders out of Useless, Texas, and they became the Banditos. I'd already left. I left when Texas passed a helmet law. I won't wear a helmet, and at least not in any place that I live. And so I left Texas and went to Arizona. But I started a motorcycle magazine down in Florida, and I've been to all of the biker rallies from Daytona Beach to Sturgis to, well, all of them. Love Ride, I've ridden with Jay Leno and partied with the ZZ Top backstage at the Love Ride. We didn't carry guns. We didn't go there, and I don't believe that any biker fired that initial shot or fired a shot at Waco. But the police did open up and killed 9 bikers and wounded a lot more. And then they arrested 170 or more, just whoever was attending there, whoever had a motorcycle there, they arrested them and put $1 million bond on them. Now, to me, for that happening on the eve of Jade Helm, ought to wake up Americans. It ought to wake up Americans and make you realize that the bikers aren't the bad guys any more than the militia was that you started. And I started the militias in New Mexico in the governor's office. We weren't a terrorist organization. We weren't the bad guys. What happened in Waco? What is that? I mean, what should we make of that? Besides, and they offered to release them. The DA, who is crooked as hell as far as I can ascertain, the they've offered to let them go if they promise not to, if they sign a paper saying that they won't sue the city of Waco for putting 170 people in jail. But is that the
Yeah, as I understand it from reports I've read, of course, the bikers didn't do any shooting at all, from what I can determine.
No.
It was all done by the cops.
Yes.
And apparently the victims were shot by snipers, a lot of them, right through between the eyes and the chest.
Yeah, maybe Lynn Horiuchi got another job.
You can't do that.
Maybe Lynn Horiuchi got another job. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, you know, it gets down to the training. The police all over the country, not only big city departments, but smaller departments, are sent to Israel.
Yes.
For training. And those that don't go to Israel are trained by Israeli instructors in the United States. So you can bet that if we looked into Waco Police Department, or sheriff, whoever the offender was, I don't even know what outfit was in charge there, most of the Waco cops, you can bet that there is Israeli training involved here, because this is how they train now. They train these guys to be sadists, to show no mercy, to show no compassion, to show no common sense, just to start shooting, whether it's people or animals, dogs, ponies, elephants, I mean, whatever the hell they want to kill. Cops have the license to kill. That's what makes them so dangerous, and why we got to change this whole idea too. The police. We can't have cops being armed and killing people at will with impunity. This is not good. This is a disaster. We have to be willing to defend ourselves at the drop of a hat from these renegade Israeli trained cops who are trained to treat us like Palestinians. This is exactly what goes on in Israel, what happened in Waco. It's an Israeli operation. You can bet. So we can't tolerate this anymore. This is a police state we live in, and it's a damnedest thing because, you know, we got more guns in this country than we got cars. Well, it's time to start using them the way they're meant to be used. And anybody that would try to wipe out people like they did at Waco, they got to be punished. And they can't do it legally. There's no legal workforce. There's no law anymore. I mean, they sent a woman to prison for federal prison for 18 months for having an opinion. But that is being prosecuted for calling Jews names and saying the Holocaust didn't happen. In Montana, not New York, not California, not Boston, but Montana. My wife points out to me that, well, you know, we got this axis in the West, Montana, Idaho, Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona. Pretty hardcore people. They're trying to break up this axis by starting this thing out in Montana. Imagine prosecuting a young guy for calling Jews kikes and for saying the Holocaust didn't happen. And imagine sending a woman to prison for 18 months for refusing to renounce her own husband, who obviously is correct in everything he said because his method has been so successful, which is the whole reason that she was sent to prison, to punish him, to make him shut up. So, you know, this is America. And we just got to change this by any means possible.
This, I think I lost some of my recording here. I'd like for you to reiterate the story about breaking the code. I mean, this is, to me, this is that story. Putting a gentleman wrote for breaking the code, And again, I'm not sure if they ever busted him or tried to arrest him for writing it. You might clear that up for me. But they put his wife in jail because she wouldn't denounce him. I mean, because she had an opinion. You told us earlier, tell it again. It's certainly worth telling, and I want you to give me his number, and I'll have him on my show. This is this.
Yeah.
People need to know, man. I said I do this after what I saw happen in Waco when they murdered 17 little children and their families to save them from a child molester that had never been convicted of that. This is why I started the militias in the governor's office in New Mexico and promoted it all over the country. But I also tried to warn people, if you join a militia that's already been formed, and there's more than 10 people in there, and you haven't known the other 10 your whole life, one of them's probably a Fed trying to set you up. And if there was any shots fired by the bikers in Waco, it was from the undercover agents that they claimed were in.
Yeah, well, again, a man named Peter Eric Hendrickson, Hendrickson, Pete Hendrickson, back in, I believe it was 2003, wrote a book called Cracking the Code, which reveals all the lies and technical lies and remedies for those lies in the Internal Revenue Code. And apparently, thousands of his readers have used his information to obtain refunds amounting to billions of dollars. So he was not prosecuted, as I understand it. You can find out directly from him. But for some reason, his wife was arrested. Not for failure to file, not for any kind of fraud, not for any kind of IRS violations, but because they wanted her to change her mind and not defend her husband. I know this sounds wacko, it sounds just unbelievable, but you can easily look at the video, just run a Doreen Hendrickson IRS search. You can see this video. And there she was in court, and the judge, this woman judge, said, well, do you still agree with what your husband wrote? She said, yeah, of course, it's true. And so the judge proceeded to tell her all these lies, and I'm telling you the facts. These are the legal facts. Now, are you going to agree with me that these are the legal facts, that your husband was wrong? She said, no, I don't agree with you. And this went back and forth. And she didn't knuckle under. And she was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison. And I know it sounds totally insane, and it is totally insane, but this is what happened. You can easily verify it by interviewing Pete Hendrickson. Now she's been in the Joint Women's Federal Prison in West Virginia. I don't know how far that is from Michigan, where they're from, but obviously it's a 9.5 hour drive. And she's having a real bad time because she's not used to this type of sadistic treatment. And the feds, are sadists, the prison people using diesel therapy. I mean, she could wind up going on a bus ride and plane ride and be totally gone for the entire 18 months and be out of touch. Oh, here's another thing. The reason I called Pete Hendrickson yesterday was to ask him if John Whitehead might have gotten involved, the famous Upper Institute civil rights attorney. He said, well, we sent him everything. We sent him the whole file, begged him to intervene on our behalf. He never got back to him. He never even acknowledged receiving it. I said, well, he's obviously afraid of the IRS, because what is the IRS? You know, it's a terrorist organization. And you mentioned Aaron Russo. I remember in that wonderful film he made, America, Freedom to Fascism, he interviewed the former IRS commissioner, a Jew, I can't remember his name right now, he's a famous guy. And he started asking this former commissioner, who is now in private legal practices, or accounting practice, whatever he is, about the voluntary nature of the 16th Amendment. I mean, isn't it based on volunteer compliance, voluntary compliance? And this Jew, you point out Aaron Russo was Jewish, he threatened him in Hebrew or Yiddish. I think it was Hebrew. He said, you know Hebrew, don't you? You know what I just said. There is no help for you. And of course, Russo died shortly thereafter, some mysterious, fast-acting cancer. So this is what we're faced with. It's a terrorist organization. We're anti-terrorists. You, Clay, me, Stu Webb, Chip Tatum, Fester, we're all anti-terrorists. We're up against terrorism, Jewish terrorism. And you got to label it for what it is so people understand what we're talking about. Terrorism was created by Jews in Russia. Either the Zionists or the communists, they both created this form of political terrorism to get their way. And it becomes mass murder. Mass murder. That's what happened. It happened especially in Russia. The Zionists didn't want the revolution to go from Moscow. They wanted it to go from Jerusalem. That's the only difference between Zionist terrorism and Bolshevik terrorism, is the capital would be. The Bolshevik consolidate power in Russia, and the revolution go out from Moscow. The Jews the Zionist Jews said, no, it's got to go out. You know, the law must go forth from Zion. So that's the only difference between them, is a technical thing. But terrorism was created by these people, and that's what we're up against now. And what is IRS? It is terror. I mean, if you say IRS to most people, their bowels get loose. That's the kind of terror we're talking about. And obviously John Whitehead, who's, done good work, no question. But he's obviously terrorized by the IRS terror organization, because he wouldn't even respond to the Hendricksons for help.
Up at the top of my webpage, freeamerican.com, and by the way, under the show I've got links to yours also, but I've got a nice picture of Alexander Solzhenitsyn. He says, you must understand, the leading Bolsheviks who took over Russia were not Russians. They hated Russians. They hated Christians. Driven by ethnic hatred, they tortured and slaughtered millions of Russians without a shred of human remorse. It cannot be overstated. Bolshevism committed the greatest human slaughter of all time. The fact that most of the world is ignorant and uncaring about this enormous crime is proof that the global media is in the hands of the perpetrators. That's Alexander Solzhenitsyn, a Nobel Prize winner. And I said, they call them Zionists or neocons today. They hate Americans of all colors, especially whites. And the reason they're so uptight about the bikers, first of all, we're not afraid of them. We're not afraid of the police. We've been harassed ever since I've been riding, which has been 50 years. They didn't seem to understand that the leather was for our protection, not because we were gang members. And the clubs aren't gangs any more than the Blue Knights. I went up to a bunch of guys at a run that had their patch on their patch, Blue Knights. I said, how come you guys refer to yourself as the club and the Hells Angels as a gang. What's the difference? Well, we don't do anything illegal. We don't do anything illegal. And I said, well, you know, I'm an investigative reporter, and I've done a hell of a lot more stories on crooked cops than I have crooked bikers. And they all just disappeared. Didn't want to talk to me after that. But
that's the most dangerous gang in America is the cops.
Yes, and they have, God, how many stories we got? We've got women that have just been killed by the police sitting in the car, firing, 10 or 15 shots into the car. I've got story after story over that. The police aren't there to protect and serve anymore. They're there to intimidate. And if you don't agree with me, I mean, do you get a warm, fuzzy feeling when you see a cop in your rear view mirror?
Yeah, he's there to help us, isn't he? He's there to put you in jail. That's the only reason cops are running around looking for people to put in jail for any goddamn crime. And you let's face it, every single offense, every single law has behind it the death penalty. Every single one that these rotten lawyers have created carry the death penalty. If the cops don't like your attitude, they'll shoot you. As we've seen over and over, I mean, every single day, we've got hundreds of people already this year been murdered by police. Over 400 at this point. And there was more than 400 last year. So we just have to become real Americans for the first time ever since the revolution. You know, this is a revolutionary country. It's the first country ever in the history of mankind to have been formed by a violent revolution. And those were not Americans fighting a foreign government. They were Englishmen fighting the English government. Unprecedented. Now, it led to some good stuff for about 8 years under the Articles of Confederation. But by 1789, the Federalists took over and gave us this stinking Constitution, which is just a 7-part program on how to run a central government. And they also gave us a private central bank. You can't have a private central bank without a central government to back it up and enforce it.
And that's exactly what the... Go ahead, I'm sorry.
It's okay, go ahead.
Well, that's exactly what they do. The FBI, the CIA, the CIA goes against anyone out there. This is what I've said about the war on terror. The war on terror is a war against anyone, anywhere that doesn't want to go along with one world government of the bankers, by the banksters, and for the banksters. And that includes all of your lawyers here. I mean, come on, if you're a lawyer, you're a member of the Bar Association, aren't you? And I believe their office is in the city of London, right next door to the Rothschilds banks. Why, why can't people understand this? They are foreign, just like the Jews. If you got a dual citizenship, you're an enemy of you're an enemy. You're a foreign spy. And most of how many of our congressmen or lawyers are dual citizens of Israel? Your whole government has been taken over, folks, and they want to call me and J.B. Campbell extremists, anti-Semites, anti-government. I'm probably the most pro-government guy you got out there. If we've got the one that Patrick Henry wanted to give us. I mean, I'm not. I think you're right about the Constitution, written by lawyers and bankers. But if you want a guideline or you want a platform, try using the Bill of Rights.
Yeah, the Bill of Rights is a great document, but it was put in there to protect us from the Constitution. You know, the Constitution turned out to be such a threat to our lives. Patrick Henry and George Mason and Lee Richard Henry Lee said, well, where's the Bill of Rights? Why haven't you Federalists given us a Bill of Rights on this thing? Oh, you don't need a Bill. I mean, go on. You trust us. We're not going to hurt you. Well, every single state constitution has a Bill of Rights attached to it. And we need a Bill of Rights attached to this to make sure that our rights are protected. No, it took 4 years to fight these Federalists, these Alexander Hamilton types, John Marshall types, to get this thing attached, the first 10 amendments attached. And of course, Hamilton was killed by Burr in a duel, and the Federalist Party quickly went to follow him, died. But as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court for like 34 years was a Federalist, John Marshall. Let's face it, we don't need a president. A president is a dictator. In nature, just because they call him a president, in fact, in those days, they said, what is a president? What do you mean by this word president? Never heard this before. Well, he presides. Okay, he presides. So, he's democratic. But we quickly saw that the president he was a dictator by nature. He's got the executive branch of government under him, which now we see is so terrible. But we didn't realize how terrible it was until 1861 when we got Abraham Lincoln. Oh my God. Within a month or so, a couple of months, he maneuvered us into war against ourselves. There wasn't a civil war, because a civil war means there's two or more sides that are vying to take over the government. They're fighting to take over the government. Well, that wasn't the case in Lincoln's war against the South. The South just wanted out. They didn't want to take over the Washington government. They just wanted out of their system of corruption, because the Southerners were being victimized by the Northern industrialists. They were paying the tariffs, and the Northerners were getting that cotton. And by God, they didn't care who picked that cotton or how it got baled. They wanted that cotton. And they were, the American flag flew over the slave quarters, not the Confederate battle flag. The American flag was over slavery. So, but Lincoln showed us the dictatorial nature of the U.S. president. And where was the check and balance? Our system is supposed to be a system of checks and balances. You got the executive, you got the legislative, you got the judicial branches. But where's the check and balance on Lincoln? How could he become a dictator virtually overnight? He deliberately provoked the Southerners in South Carolina by supplying that ridiculous Fort Sumter. They finally had enough, and they fired a few shells at it. Nobody got hurt. But that was it. He got into war. And by God, now we find out there's 850,000 Americans died in that stinking thing. And we became a dictatorship. He arrested his political opponents and put them in prison with no habeas corpus, with no trial, with no nothing, for the entire length of the war. He moved Congress and exiled to a southern state from a northern state because he dared go against Lincoln. And then we got Woodrow Wilson and World War I and the Federal Reserve and the 16th Amendment and the 17th Amendment and all this crap jammed down us by Colonel House under the rubric of Wilson. We also got the Bolshevik Revolution, the communism under, this is what we get with the president. Then we got Franklin Roosevelt. Oh my God. With the United Nations, we got atomic bombs dropped on civilians. And the whole cities in Europe and Japan wiped out by fire. This is what you get with presidency.
Yeah, and how did Franklin do? Not only did Franklin D. Roosevelt go to war against the German people, it was the Jews who declared, with a full-page ad, declared war against the German people, not Hitler, but the German people. And Of course, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, he was, I guess he was really good buddies with Uncle Joe Stalin, who was responsible for the murder of 60 million white Christian Russians. And we want to talk about a Holocaust that never happened with 6 million people. They love that little 6 million mark. That's why I figured they'll drop a bomb on New York City. They'll be able to kill 6 million Jews there and not worry about the collateral damage, which would be, you know, all the white Christians that they blow up too, huh? Of course, they already dropped that atomic bomb on New York City. That's what happened at the World Trade Center. Only shaped nuclear charges could have that much force to and that much heat to create molten metal in the basement for months. Rocket fuel don't do that.
Yeah, you know, this brings up the whole idea of false flags. And when we first got this false flag plan from the Joint Chiefs of Staff under General Lyman Lemnitzer, Jew, who came up with this crackpot scheme for false flag operations, pretending, you know, you use American forces to attack American people and blame it on Castro to justify an invasion of Cuba. Presented it to John Kennedy, who, of course, said, "Get the hell out of here. This is a total insanity." But what was the first false flag we got after that? It was the assassination of Kennedy, supposedly by Oswald. Well, we know now Oswald was probably working for Bobby Kennedy as his agent. You know, Oswald was over in Russia working for the CIA for, God, a couple of years anyway. And got trapped over there when JFK fired Dulles and the other two CIAs over the Bay of Pigs, and Oswald was trapped. Well, Haslam wrote Dr. Mary's Monkey. You got to see this book. It's unbelievable. It's fantastic. But his theory, and I have to go with it, is that Bobby Kennedy, who was Attorney General, said, "Okay, Oswald, I'll bring you back, but I want you helping me go down to Louisiana and Texas and figure out what's going on down there against my brother." And that, I think, is what Oswald was doing. I think he was working for Kennedy. And then when he got, you know, accused and then killed, Bobby Kennedy knew it was all over. So that was the first false flag, was the actual Kennedy assassination, blaming on the wrong person. That's the nature of a false flag. Then we got the Gulf of Tonkin, 64 the next year, which never happened. You know, the North Vietnamese Navy supposedly firing torpedoes at American destroyers in the Gulf of Tonkin. What the hell are they doing in the Gulf of Tonkin in the first place? Showing the flag, you know, trying to get into a war. Well, that never happened. That was a false flag. Then the USS Liberty, other of all false flags, really, was using unmarked French fighters to attack an NSA/Navy ship, blaming on Egypt. Now, Operation Cyanide also included the nuking of Cairo and Alexandria. And the planes actually took off from the aircraft carriers, these F-4 Phantoms carrying nuclear bombs that headed for Cairo and Alexandria. But a guy named Terry Halbardier on the Liberty, the chief anyway, all the antennas on the Liberty had been destroyed on the first pass, including this massive dish on the stern that was pointed at the moon when they wanted to send a signal to NSA headquarters in Cheltenham, Maryland. They would bounce the signal off the moon, so it couldn't be intercepted. That's how sophisticated things were even back in those days. But every single antenna and dish was destroyed by these Israeli fighters on the first pass, except this one out-of-service antenna. And Halbardier thought, well, maybe if we could get a coax to that, we could get a distress signal out. And he did. He braved rocket fire, machine guns, cannons, napalm, He got out there and attached his coax to the out-of-service antenna that had not been destroyed. He got up an SOS. Well, that killed the whole Operation Cyanide right there. There's a thing depended on no communications. Sinking the ship as quickly as possible, killing all 400 guys, or however, 300 guys that were on board. They only killed 34, and wounded 171. The ship wouldn't sink, despite a 40-foot hole in the waterline. And, it's just, so that was a false flag. It failed. It was a massive failure, a massive disaster, as I said. It took 34 years to come up with a better false flag, which was 9/11, and that got the job done.
What do you think the next false flag will be? What are their plans? Are we talking about a nuclear attack on America somewhere that they can blame on Iran? And exactly, maybe you could shed some light on exactly why they are so upset with Iran. I mean, besides just kicking their man out, the Shah, besides them kicking the Shah out, they armed Saddam Hussein. There were, how do we know that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction? Well, we got the receipt here. We got, we know because we sold it to them so they could use them against Iran. And what did Saddam finally get tired of working for him? And they killed him, or was that a lie too?
The whole thing was a lie. You remember April Glaspie, the U.S. ambassador to Iraq? Here's a video of her online speaking to Saddam in his palace, saying that, we understand that you have disputes with Kuwait over the Ramallah oil field, that they're directionally drilling into your deposits. So if you, in other words, she said, if you want to correct this, then we would have no interest in these Arab disputes. Well, Saddam, of course, had been a client of D.C. Say he was installed. I mean, he took over the Ba'ath Party. He took over from Iraq back in the years and years ago. He was working for the CIA ever since he came to power. He was a CIA asset. So when the U.S. ambassador tells him that if you want to take back the oil fields that are being stolen from you by Kuwait, carry on. So he thought, well, hell, I mean, why stop there? Kuwait is actually Iraq anyway. It was carved into Iraq by after the Treaty of Versailles and the changing the map of the world after World War I. So it's a bunch of phony kings and emirs. Anyway, let's take our land back. That was a trap set by George H.W. Bush through April Glaspie, and unfortunately he fell into it. And that was all Bush needed to denounce him as a monster, say that he had weapons of mass destruction, and all these lies. This is 91. This is the old Bush, senior Bush. Then his rotten moron son comes in there and does it, oh my God, 1,000 times worse. Based on the lies of weapons of mass destruction. We had given them chemical weapons. Rumsfeld was over there supplying that under Bush 1. But the whole thing is set up to create war, by the Council on Foreign Relations. This is our nemesis. This is the organization of evil, the Council on Foreign Relations. All the members of our government who do these terrible things to other people around the world are members of this diabolical, subversive Ministry of War, private Ministry of War. They put all the important people into government. So it has to be wiped out. You know, I'll never say a damn thing without some kind of solutions, we've suggested. This Council on Foreign Relations is reported 70% Jewish. It has to be wiped out, along with AIPAC, ADO, and all the rest of the Jewish axis of control. That's what we do. So the same thing, whether it's Operation Northwoods, created by General Lyman Lemnitzer, given to Kennedy, who told him to go to hell. So he was promptly killed the next year. It's all to do with the Jews. Kennedy had told his brother Bobby to go after AIPAC. They had a different name in those days. It's been changed to AIPAC. So I want them registered as a foreign agency. That will lose them their tax exemption, and it will lose them their support. Because the only reason people, Jews, contribute to it is because they can get a write-off. So I want that shut down. Bobby Kennedy started to do that, but his brother was killed too soon, so that couldn't happen.
Well, Bobby Kennedy went after the organized crime, and when you say organized crime, or you say mafia, it ain't a bunch of Italians running around here. It's the Jews that took over. It wasn't Al Capone running things. It was his Jews.
The weasel. Oh, Jimmy the Weasel Fratiano. He wrote a book about that, about his life in Moscow. He said, well, if the Italians and the Sicilians are blamed by Hollywood as the organized crime, and we're involved. There's no question. But we're not the bosses. You see the kinds of houses our leaders live in. They're pretty modest. But the real organized crime, the overall umbrella, is Meyer Lansky and Arnold Rothstein before him, and all these other Jews that run the real organized crime. Of course, the ultimate organized crime is the Federal Reserve, as you pointed out, and those are just signals going down. But Fratiano came out and said it's the Jews that run organized crime. We just are the errand boys. We got our own turf, no question. But we answer to them.
What's your opinion on what is happening in Texas? They've even introduced a discussion to legalize marijuana. I'd love to see that happen. They threatened me with 99 years for having marijuana in Texas 45 years ago. Now we've got the open carry. The open carry activists won in Texas. So, concealed carry in colleges, Abbott signed that. Abbott has also set up and signed a bill to let Texas hold its own gold, taking it out of the Federal Reserve in Washington, in New York, Washington. They're talking about moving the gold here. Personally, I think that we are to restore the republic in Texas. I don't like having to drive to another state to see our mountains. I want to bring them back to Texas and the republic. but this thing with the bikers, them shooting all the bikers, and $170 million in bonds against people that didn't commit any crime. There was no crime committed in Waco. They're trying to charge them with organized crime, and it'd be better. I think they could make a better case by charging the police with organized crime with this whole thing. But what's happening in Texas? This whole states' rights thing is maybe making other states wake up. When Colorado legalized marijuana, guess what? They started making a lot of money off of it, and their whole prison system, putting these people in prison for victimless crimes, that's the numbers have decreased there, but they're really making a lot of money on it. So the states' rights are the way to go?
Well, Texas, is probably slowly getting back at the feds. Or remember that deal when the Texas legislature had gotten so many complaints from people about TSA and the atrocities going on at the airports with this bunch of thugs standing around TSA, putting their hands down people's pants, making old ladies in wheelchairs get up or reveal everything, take an X-ray, scaring little kids, doing all this crap, showing their muscle. What was the TSA? I mean, it was created by this Jew and his cronies, Michael Chertoff, an Israeli citizen in charge of Homeland Security. The first time we ever had something called the Department of Homeland Security after 9/11. It's already set up, before the attack. It's already ready to be signed. If any congressman or senator put his heels in, he was killed. Like guy from Minnesota and others got anthrax in the mail. Leahy and Daschle got anthrax. The guy Paul Wellman from Minnesota his airplane was crashed with all his family and pilots and everybody and assistants on board. Killed them. He was a serious opponent of Bush and Chertoff. But Texas actually said we're going to get the TSA out of the state. So what did Obama do? He said, you do that, and I will declare Texas a no-fly zone. And that's what we're up against. We're up against this dictatorship. So I guess Texas is slowly flexing its muscles again, calling for its gold from the Fed. As you say, I'm not in favor of open carry. I think it's a mistake. I know I wouldn't carry a gun openly. You got to be concealed. You got to keep them guessing. You see you carrying a gun, they can just open fire on you. You got to have the willingness to use the gun, number one, but you don't need to show it till it's time to bring it out. So I don't recommend open carry. I don't recommend concealed permits. That goes on your driver's license. Cop stops you. Oh, he's carrying. Let's shoot him. So you got to keep them guessing. Not much guesswork with me, but in general, you got to keep them guessing. And don't give them any damn advantages. But I guess Texas, for the other things you mentioned, is being targeted. It's a red state, and Jade Helm killed all these guys in Waco. There's definitely something afoot. And it may well be the beginnings of rounding people up, dissidents up. We'll see next month. But it is treason. Jade Helm is treason, and any other operation like it has got to be resisted. And anybody involved is a traitor. Now we know remember the questionnaire back in '94, created by the Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey. The questionnaire asked of Marines and Army. There were 45 questions on it. The first 44 had to do mainly with if the United Nations is in control of the military, will you take orders from foreign officers? There were many variations on that theme in the first 44 questions. But the 45th question said, okay, a law has been passed in America outlawing the private ownership of firearms. Many people will not comply with this law based on various reasons. Are you willing to enforce this law and to shoot American citizens who resist? And that was asked at the various Army and Marine centers. And it came back about 43% said they would fire on Americans, and about 57% said they would not. Now, that's 1994. I would assume that based on the Iraq War, the Afghan War, and all the other VA atrocities we see happening to the veterans, and the fact that Senator Feinstein said no, they can't have the guns because they all have PTSD and they're mentally unfit to own firearms. This is a Jewish mentality in a nutshell. Dianne Feinstein saying this. But I would, based on all these nasty things that have happened since 1994, I would say that at least 60% now of the military will not fire on us. 40% might. But so I think our duty is to talk to everybody in the military we know, friends of friends, relatives, whatever, and get them into the mentality of wiping out the traitors in the military. That's their responsibility. We'll take care of the civilian traitors, but the ones in the military who do pose a threat, who said they would fire on us, have to be wiped out by the loyal ones, the 60%, which I estimate at this point.
Well, there's never been a time in history where it's been easy to be free, is it?
No.
And
No,
they're going to make it. We've got some advantages here. We've got the internet. We've got the ability to communicate with each other without, advance a little bit from Russia with a little granny sitting on the corner with a pad and pencil. But we're still got a ways to go. Still got a ways to go.
Phenomenon. We got this situation with this horrible feminoid called Janet Napolitano, she was in charge of Homeland Security for years. She came up with, if you see something, say something, which is the same thing you're talking about, this informers that we saw in Russia and East Germany and all the communist countries and China. We got these informers always watching and reporting. So these people also are traitors. The traitors get the penalty of death. They have to, otherwise, what are we about? I mean, we can't coexist with evil. And now Janet Napolitano is the chancellor or something of the whole University of California system. So, so much subversion has always come out of the universities and the colleges. Now it's entrenched with this horrible lesbian crackpot, Janet Napolitano, in charge of education of the biggest university system in America. It's a dreadful situation.
Now, we've got something else that's happening, and we talked a little bit about it a couple of days ago on my show with one of my guests. The homeless. They are trying to make it illegal to be homeless, and I think they are planning on rounding up the homeless. And remember, with the last Bush, when he gave that $2 trillion back to the banksters, he could have given it to the people. They could have paid off their mortgages and given it back to the bankers. But they made a few million people homeless. I think they're planning on rounding up those homeless now. People that are living in their cars or living with their parents, they're going to round them up and put them in the FEMA camps. What are the chances of that?
Well, I think it's already happened. Now, you look at Detroit. Now, Detroit's lost, over 1 million people just gone under. But where did they go? Did they go to Des Moines? Did they go to Boise? I mean, people lost their jobs. Once you lose your job, like me, and you lose your home, like me, then where do you go? Go in the street. Now, there is a camp in Colorado called Fort Lyon. And this camp has been set up for the homeless, to take the homeless. Fort Lyon, Colorado. So I'm suspecting that a lot of the homeless are being picked up.
Yeah, not easily missed.
Okay.
Not easily missed, huh? Fort Lyon, Colorado.
Fort Lyons, that's been set up for the homeless. So I'm thinking that a lot of the homeless are already going away. And whether they go on the red list or the blue list or whatever they call them, I think they're disappearing. I mean, Detroit's lost 1 million people at least, and nobody's can quite figure out what happened to them all. And the cities all across the country, cops are rounding up the homeless and not allowing them to be on the street. What's happened to them? Where are they? So I think it's already happening.
All right, we're lost here. Lost the call here. We'll try to get that back. Have we got you back yet, JB?
Yep.
Okay. I've lost looks like Veterans Truth. Let me see if we just had everything go down here. Must be getting too close to the truth here. We're trying to get that Veterans Truth Network back up. Again, Skype's crashed. It's done that to me 2 or 3 times. I think we're still up on Truth. Yeah, hold on while we try to get the call back. Maybe that's happening. And 42.
Welcome to Blog Talk Radio. Please enter your host password. Finish. Press
To start your show now, press 1. To hear important instructions, press 2.
Since it appears you're calling back into a live show, we're reconnecting you now.
All right, we're back here. I've lost JB for just a moment. We'll see if we can get Skype to run on that. All right, working on it. Well, they've been a little overactive. Maybe the fusion centers have been a little overactive today. Maybe we're making too much. Yeah, we're back now. I got Blog Talk back. I got Veterans Truth back. It's evidently we stepped on some toes, and the fusion centers probably caught hell because they weren't blocking the show properly. But we're back up. We're still up on Crusade Truth Radio. That's all still working. Back up on Veterans Truth and back up on Blog Talk. How about it, guys? And the chat room. We'll see if all right, Cyanide, LW, I am the universe. Are you hearing us again? Do we have connection again? Is Blog Talk working again? Let me know. All right. JB, we were just talking about the homeless. These camps that are being set up all over. And I've even heard that some of them are being equipped with guillotines, and that's kind of interesting because one of the things the Jews have been doing over in Israel is selling the organs, turning the Palestinians into involuntary organ donors. And if you have a convicted criminal and you electrocute him, you can't use his organs. If you just cut his head off, then all of the organs, if you got a staff standing by, all of the organs are salvageable. Maybe that's just a coincidence that we've ordered some of our United States, the United States is ordered and stocking guillotines.
Stocking what?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me? We're working on this.
Yeah, I can hear you. I didn't hear that word. They're stocking what?
Guillotines. We're stocking a guillotine. We're buying guillotines. We're bringing in guillotines. And the reason for that is if you sentence someone to death and you cut off their head, then you can salvage their organs.
Well, we know that Israel has been caught in the organ selling business. They're killing Palestinians. I don't know if they're chopping off their heads, but they're selling Palestinian organs on the market. They're also trafficking in Chinese organs because the Chinese are doing the same thing. They're shooting people in the head and harvesting their organs. And in Israel, a bunch of rabbis are involved in this trafficking of human organs. So I agree with you. I've heard about the guillotines, heard about the shackles and the train in the boxcars. I don't know, but it's pretty horrifying concept. But what I'm saying is we can't let ourselves find out about this until we take over these camps ourselves. We can't go in there as prisoners, and that means you have to fight. You have to be armed all the time and be not only able, but looking forward to wiping out anybody that would put you in a camp or subject you to a guillotine or shackles or whatever. I mean, our government does this. Look at Guantanamo Bay, look at Bagram, look at Abu Ghraib, look at all these CIA black torture centers around the world. This is what our government does. We still haven't come to terms with Abu Ghraib. What was done to those people? Where did this come from? Where did this virtually overnight ability of U.S. soldiers to treat people in this way, sadistically, with sexual torture, sodomy with broomsticks, sicking dogs on them, biting their genitals, making them screw each other? I mean, where did this come from? How do you know where it comes from? It comes from Israel. These people were all trained by Israelis before the war started. There were even Israelis involved in Ghraib. Look at that. So this is what we're against. So we got to change our attitude. We got to look forward to killing these people. Not as something done, reluctantly, I'm sorry. No. This is what we're here for. We're here to defend the defenseless. We're here to take care of ourselves and to not allow tyranny any longer. We got to stand for something. We got to stand for dignity and freedom from these monsters that are in charge of our government. The government's got to be overthrown. You can't say, well, let's keep the presidency, let's keep the two houses of Congress, let's keep the Supreme Court. No. That was then. That was from 1789. That was their way, and it didn't work out. This is our time. We've got to come up with something better. Well, what is better than that? Well, obviously the Articles of Confederation are better than that, because it doesn't give a central government any power. It doesn't have a dictator. It doesn't have these two fraudulent houses of Congress. You know, what happened in 1913, 1914, we got the 17th Amendment. The 16th Amendment, everybody knows, the income tax law. That's total crap, as we well know. But the next one, the 17th Amendment, came about at the same time under Wilson. Now, you know, I hate the Constitution. I make no bones about it. It's a fraud. It's always been a fraud foisted on us by Hamilton and his cronies in Europe and the Bank of England. Anyway, there were a couple of good things in it, like the debt-free currency issued by the Congress. That was good. It shouldn't be done by the Congress, but it should be done by the Confederation in the future. Debt-free currency, you got to have that. No more Federal Reserve, no more private debt-based currency. But everything else has got to be thrown out because it didn't work out for us. It didn't work out. It just became a dictatorship. So let's stand for something, and that means no more federal government. It has destroyed the world, not only America, but look what it did to Europe. Look what it did to China. Look what it did to Central America. It has created poverty, misery, mass death. Think about it.
Argentina.
World War II.
How about Argentina? What did they do to Argentina, JB?
Exactly. You saw dictatorships, same in Chile. That's what, you know, Kissinger did. But there's always a Kissinger. There's always some rat in the woodpile. There's always a Jewish rat to boot. Always. Without exception. So let's wake up, smell the gefilte fish, and start rounding these guys up. Because that's what they intend to do to us. Anything they intend to do to us, we can do to them. It's defense. That's why I created the American Defense Party. And when it comes to self-defense, anything goes. That's why they renamed the War Department the Defense Department, and they made it sound legitimate. There's no defense in the Defense Department. It's aggression. It's war against innocent people overseas. And now it's going to be our turn. So,
you know, 45 years ago, I wrote a book, fiction book, science fiction supposedly at the time, about the United States in the future when at least 46 states had abolished all the laws against the victimless crimes. The drugs, you got drugs, you're growing drugs in South America, and you're growing coca in Peru. Bring it to the border, put it on a table, pay your duties, and if you don't have any laws against victimless crimes, America's going to go to the border, and instead of a fence there, set up tables, and buy anything they want. You want marijuana? Buy it. Buy it there, take it home, and do what you want with your body. Now, 45% of the U.S. debt is illegal and fraudulent, so we could pay it off immediately and take no more debt. We should eliminate the CIA and DHS, and if you open the border to real free trade, then you can probably stop all the illegal immigration. There wouldn't be any reason for it, and the money that you take from the drug cartels could go back to drug cartels. I should just say CIA and Mossad, because they're the ones. And you can find this in my book, Mystery Babylon. They're the ones that brought all the cocaine, all the heroin into this country to sell it to you and your children. And if we could grow hemp in our backyard, if we could grow pot in our backyard, we certainly wouldn't need to pay to get involved with drug dealers, would we? And one of the things that Gordon Duff brought up is that if he was president, free energy would be released immediately. If we could put a generator, a magnetic generator in our garage, and we've got the ability to make that, but the FBI would come and arrest you if you start trying to sell your electricity back to the power companies. We've got the ability to fix this, JB. It is the federal government, it is the banksters, it is the City of London and the Washington, D.C. and the Vatican that prevents us from doing that, because that keeps us enslaved. If you got to pay that electric bill every month instead of generating your own in your garage, that's the control that they have over you. And we might not be able to do it nationally, but Texas is taking a step in the right direction. Colorado is taking a step in the right direction. And I think that we need to point that out to the rest of the people in the United States. You can do that by passing on this show, by telling people. And yeah, it does carry some danger. It just like the story of the gentleman, the author's wife, who wouldn't denounce her husband being thrown in jail. We've got to stop that. We got to rally behind her. And like I said, get me his number, and I'll bring him on the show for next week. We got to do this, and we are doing the right thing here. We got this show. We're educating you, and you guys. It's up to you to kind of hold your representatives, your mayor, your congressman, your state people. You got to hold their feet to the fire. I think Abbott's doing the right thing. How about your governor? The governor of New Mexico, when who knew that I was advocating for the militia and training them, he came to my house. He stopped off and got a nice picture of Governor Gary Johnson and I together. I think I was wearing a T-shirt that said, "Buy a gun, piss off a liberal," and shaking his hand. And JB, I hope you're able to go to work. They've tried to eliminate your ability to earn a living. They tried to eliminate my ability to earn a living. And matter of fact, one of the things that they did was try to charge me $1,600 that I didn't have for a ticket that wasn't legal. And we're trying to take care of that today, too. JB, thank you. I really appreciate your work. I appreciate what you're doing. Pass this on, folks. Pass this show on. We do have the ability to make a difference if we work together and we don't let ourselves get pushed around or intimidated.
Exactly. Anytime, Clay.
All right, JB. Thank you. God bless you. And keep you safe.
Okay, thank you.